These days I'm on vacation in Italy with my family. I'm filming from our vacation house, which is why the background is different from the usual. You probably hear a little bit of echo. I hope you don't mind. But what I want to tell you about in this video is Indian Summer. This is a board game by Stronghold games. It is a puzzle game, kind of like Tetris, the board game. There are many games based on that idea. Well, this is one of them. I saw the game on a shelf in my friendly local game store in Bloomington, Indiana. For some reason, I got this intuition that this would make for a great travel game. In particular, I thought, oh, this to me probably is one of those games where there is a lot of air in the box. The components are really small, oversized box, so I'm just going to bring the components with me. It's going to be small and light. Totally wrong. This box is very full of stuff, so this is the size of the box that you have to carry with you if you're traveling with the game. It's not heavy per se, but when you're adding it to your luggage, well, there are a lot of games that are lighter than this one. But I'm stubborn, and when I realized that, I decided I don't care. I'm still gonna bring it with me across the ocean, and I'm gonna play it on vacation. And this is gonna make a great travel game, I decided. And I'm actually, in that regard, I was right. This is a perfect travel game for us, for our family. Not because it is small and light, but because my family loves it. I'm playing it with my daughters, I'm playing it with my wife, who is a casual gamer and doesn't play or enjoy as many games as my daughters and I do. So I'm very glad that I brought the game with me. But without further ado, let me show how the game works. Each player in the game has a board such as this one. There are several available, they are double-sided, and they show these symbols here in different order and different configurations for replay value. However, each board and each side is divided in 6 areas of 12 squares each. Each player also has a set of tiles that you will replenish during the game. You take tiles from here, you place them on the board, and then you will replenish them from a very large supply. And these are really nice looking, high quality, sturdy tiles. Also, tiles have holes, and we'll talk about those later. And finally, you also have these tokens here that you can spend to perform special actions. The flow of the game is very simple. During a turn, you must take a normal action, and you can take any number of special actions by spending tokens. A normal action can be to take a tile from your personal supply and place it on your board, or to take a squirrel. There is a supply of squirrels. Squirrels simply are tiles that are 1 square large, and you place a squirrel on the board. So basically each turn you place either one of your tiles or a squirrel on the board. Placing squirrels is not particularly good in general, but sometimes you need to fill up an area, and you cannot do that with the other tiles that you have. And then we're also talking about special actions. Now, tiles, I guess you can probably figure out the general rules. So you cannot put them weird like that. They have to follow the grids. You cannot stack them on one another. They cannot hang out of the board. Pretty much just like place tiles in a way that doesn't look weird, and you'll be fine. Each tile, as you can see, has a little hole, a little window. And it is advantageous to you to place tiles in such a way that these symbols here will show through the window. When that happens, you take the corresponding token, a mushroom in this case, from a general supply, and you place it there. And for the time being, nothing else happens really. Next, suppose that is my next turn, and so we place that one there. And so basically you continue like this. You place a tile as your main action, unless you're adding a squirrel. And as for main actions, your turn would be over. And you will not usually replenish your collection, your set of tiles here, until you used all of your tiles. Now, what happens when you complete one of your 12 areas entirely? Like that would be the case, Well, that is when you get to actually collect the tokens representing the things that you found earlier. Another important thing is the animals. There are some tiles here that I use to organize animals. You see, this area looks very messy. This is one of the games that looks the messiest that I can think of. It just looks messy, but actually that's the way it is meant to look like. This circle of tiles here, which you draw randomly, is where you draw the tiles to replenish your area, and then you move the bush there to indicate where the line of available tiles starts. And we're talking about the squirrels. You have a supply here. Those are the tokens. You have a supply here. And we're talking about the animals. As you can see, there are two boards here used to organize the animals. And there are different animal tiles of different shapes. Some also come with a special tile, that is when you get control with token. When you get control of that animal tile, you also get that token. How do you get the animals on your board and what do they do for you? Well, when on your board there is a configuration of contiguous, of adjacent empty holes, like that would be the case. We have 4 there. Then you get from those boards there the tile that corresponds to that sequence of empty holes. You can also choose to place a smaller one. You don't have to cover the thing entirely. What is the advantage? Basically, you're placing the animals. You can only place the animals on empty holes, and then empty holes that show symbols will produce that again. So basically, first remember, you get the treasure placed on that area when you cover with the tile and you see the symbol through the window. Then you complete an area, so you bring that home, and then you can activate those holes again. Again, if you're able to form a configuration that will be covered by an animal tile. And so, for example, here you have pretty much 4 holes, one next to one another. But again, remember, it's very important. They need to be empty. And suppose this is what we have here. This is what we have here. I probably will want to empty these before. Then I can get this one, place it here, and also get this one, which is associated with this particular animal. Feathers are particularly important things. So this is for the general idea, for the main action. Place a tile, add tokens, pick up tokens when you complete one of the 6 areas, add animals when you have a set of adjacent holes, empty holes, and that is that. But really the heart of the game is about these tiles that you're making, these tokens that you're making. You're doing so much work to get them, because really spending them correctly is what will win you the game. The berries, when you spend a berry, you can replenish your personal pool of tiles, even if it's not empty yet. And this is very, very important, because, well, maybe in that line of tiles that I showed you earlier, there's some good stuff that you really want, even though otherwise without the berry you wouldn't be able to get it. The nut calls a squirrel. You spend a nut to get a squirrel on your board. Again, very convenient, because remember, if you're doing that as your main action, that's all you're doing as your main action, so not good. And also, there's no limit to the number of special actions you can take, so you may be able to get a couple of squirrels on the board in the same turn. As for the mushroom allows you to take a tile from 2 opponents, so you get 2 tiles. Although I have to say, I haven't seen the mushroom used mainly for that, and we'll see how that is possible, even though that is the only official use for the tile. The most important, the most powerful of these tokens is the feather that when you spend it lets you place on your board 2 tiles from your personal area. So you need to have at least 2 there, which means, well, it's a big advantage. So what do you do if you want a feather because you don't start with one? Well, you collect one from your board or you trade for it. And this is the other interesting idea. That board that had those stacks of animals there that they just rudely dumped, so you could take this board, also has a reminder or something else that you can do with the tokens that you can trade them. The arrow means you can trade this to get that. So actually with 2 you can exchange 2 berries for a nut, or 2 nuts for a mushroom, or 2 mushrooms for a feather. When you have a mushroom, you're really close, well, to the feather. And that just gives you so much momentum. Remember, it's just about getting there, filling up your board before someone else does it. So pretty much I've seen mushrooms, usually you see them as that's half a feather, much more than I can steal a piece from another player. That can be useful, but the feather is always useful. Seeing good stuff to get in the position from which you can take it, because you have to take the piece of the opponent which is the closest to the backpack when you use the feather. So being able to really take advantage of that is situational, but being able to place 2 extra pieces on the board, almost always useful. So this is the general idea. Collect tokens in any way possible, spend them like crazy, because at the end of the game they don't matter. There is no scoring at the end of the game. So use as many resources as you can to fill up your board, and you're the first player to completely cover your board, you win the game. So I'm glad that I brought Indian Summer with me. My wife is playing it, my daughters are playing it. It has a lot of interesting things. The puzzle element, well, it's something that works. Tetris has been one of my favorite video games pretty much since it came out a couple of decades ago. I just like the general idea, I like the kind of puzzle. I like it in other games, even smaller games. Tiny Park, for example, has that idea, and that's a Haba game that I play with my daughter Luisa. This is definitely more complex, has more stuff going on, and this is something that is more appropriate to play with my daughter Amelia, who is 8, and with my wife. What is interesting here is that there are 2 elements that, mechanically speaking, are very different from one another, and yet somehow they do work well together. I would even say, oh, they meld together, they integrate well. They kind of stay separate and yet switching from one to the other constantly. I don't know why it works. In other games, that would be a weakness, that would be a distraction. And yeah, what can I tell you? I like having these 2 elements. One, of course, they're very clean, they're very abstract, they're very straightforward puzzle idea. It's non-negotiable, it's not interactive, it doesn't have to do with trying to figure out the players and timing things. If a square fits there, I need a square. If it doesn't fit, then I cannot place the square there. Just the simple, again, abstract non-negotiability of the puzzle has something that is enjoyable, On the other hand, you have a little bit of an engine element, of an engine building element, of a resource management. You're collecting those tokens, figuring out how to spend them. And that is very important because there is no scoring at the end. You win by completing your tableau first. And so just spend away, just use those tokens, use as many as possible. Maybe just for your personal satisfaction. I finish my tableau and I have 20 tokens at the end. But most likely if you do that, you're going to lose the game. The people that are going to win are the ones that collect and spend the tokens effectively. Those tokens are not born equal. What they do is very different, and really the value is very different. Berries and acorn are very important. They're less powerful, but they're still very important, and you use them all the time. Berries, you really want to make sure that you get those pieces if you see some interesting piece, especially because that allows you to get pieces early in the turn, and then you can use those in combination with other effects. Acorns. Well, those are so important that actually very often is what you will use at the end of the game. At the end of the game, maybe you have 3-4 squares that are left to cover, and then you simply convert everything you have in a bunch of acorns, and you have this sort of like invasion of the squirrels. You have the impression of like paratrooping squirrels, paratrooping in Normandy, and they cover everything in one turn, which at the beginning may feel a little gimmicky. My wife, for example, had mixed feelings about that. She almost felt that when I was winning that way, 6 squirrels in the last turn and done, it felt a little bit like cheating to her. And then she started doing it too, and she was fine with that. It is just something that that's so different. It's so different from the slow, I would say, rational, terse, clean build-up of the puzzle that you have in the previous phases, that almost felt like not just rushed, but also, again, so different that it felt almost like I was bending the rules. Of course, that's not bending the rules, it's part of the design. But it is something that I want to bring up because it's something that, at least at first sight, may feel strange and may turn off some players. Give this game not just one try or two, give it 3 or 4, and then something maybe will click for you too, and you'll also become passionate, like my wife has become passionate about this game after 3 or 4 games, not at the beginning. It is just part of the design. Know that if the opponent has 6 or 7 squares that are left to cover, well, then probably the opponent is going to win next turn or in 2 turns maximum. It's a turn that speeds up towards the end. It's a game that speeds up towards the end, gains a certain momentum, and that's the way the design works. Nothing wrong with that. Mushrooms, that's a strange token because in a sense, it is the most interactive element in the game. There's an element to the interaction. If nothing else, I'm seeing what you're doing because I want to get a sense of where we are, how you ahead. This is the seat of chance for me, how I'm doing. If nothing else for that. But actually then collecting the tokens from the public area is very important. And there may be cases where there are 2 of those tiles that I really want, and one that maybe is not so important for me, but it really is for you, so I'm still gonna get it with the berry anyways, just to take it from you. So there's an element of indirect interaction that leads to an element of take that, but nevertheless is not a major element, because then if I really don't need that piece, it is clogging my area where I only have 5 pieces. So that is a problem too. But still, I've done that sometimes to collect pieces, mainly to take them away from other players. And that, of course, is very important. And also with the mushrooms, even more important is I'm taking pieces directly from you. I'm taking pieces directly from you, which is, of course, even more interactive, even more take that-ish. However, I haven't seen the mushrooms used very often in that facility. Maybe because we prefer, when we're playing as a family, we don't do the take that thing all that much. But really, most importantly, most times that I play the game, to me a mushroom is not a mushroom, it's half a feather. Because the feather is so much more powerful than the mushroom. Then again, unless I'm taking away the victory piece from you with the mushroom, I'm gonna use my mushrooms to get feathers, and then I'm gonna use the feathers. And pretty much, I wouldn't say that the players that use the most feathers, that collect the feathers the most often, are always going to win, but it's likely. It is a very powerful strategy. That doesn't give me, however, the feeling that, although it is a dominant strategy, that it breaks the game, because it doesn't turn into a simple, boring algorithm. Get the feathers and then you automatically win, because there are different ways, different things that you have to do from game to game to get those feathers. Your board is different. All starting boards have a feather, but it's in different locations. The pieces that are there are different. Getting an animal to make a feather space produce twice is very powerful, but again, that means you have to work for that. Getting the badger from the common area that gives you a feather is very powerful, but that's not that easy to achieve with those 4 holes all in the same, all in a square position. So true, get feathers and you win, but is not, you don't go on autopilot to get a lot of feathers. You have to devise a strategy, change it based on what is on the board and what is available. So it is a powerful strategy, but it does not reduce the enjoyment of the game because you have to think about it, you have to make it work. So I like all of these elements. So it is a game that I think has a lot to like if you're able to see how these elements that seem very different from one another and maybe are very different from one another somehow work. They work together well. They don't become a melting pot. They're sort of like a salad bowl. They retain their identity, they retain their difference, and yet when you play them together, work, at least in my experience and in the experience of my family. So what we have here is a game that is not complex to play. It's definitely something is accessible to casual players, but that also has enough things going on for it for more committed, more regular players. It has a certain element of interaction, which is, for my family, just right. There is some of it, but not so much so that the game becomes confrontational, just because, again, not every member in my family enjoys confrontational mechanics. So in general, although it is a big game and relatively heavy, again, just compared to what we think of as a travel game, I'm happy that I brought it with me. I may bring it with me in future travels too, because it is a game that I've enjoyed, and most importantly, my family, every member of my family has enjoyed, which is, well, something quite good for us. And so, give it a try. I recommend it. It's a fun game.